Today's Japanese slang term is going to take us back to the 1900s, so wait, this is wrong. Okay, much better. So today I'm going to be talking about the word haikara. Now normally in these videos, of course, I talk about slang terms and ryukogo that are new, which makes sense. But I recently read this book, Sirens of the Western Shore, which was a very interesting book on how the translation of English texts into Japanese influenced the Japanese language, as well as Japanese discussions of self and identity. In that, though, it notes this term, haikara, and talks about the evolution of it, which, as someone that does what I do in these videos, really interested me, so I thought I'd talk about it myself. If you're not familiar, haikara is a shortening of not high color, but high collar. And in contemporary Japanese, it is not considered a slang word or anything like that, it's just a word that exists, which is used to mean that someone or something is fashionable, especially but not exclusively in the sense of fashionable in a way that is Western and also a little bit old school. So for instance, in a post like this, you can see the word being used just to refer to something as cool or fashionable in a way that is fairly unremarkable. But this, you can see that definitely the thing that they're calling haikara is at least somewhat related to Western dishes. It looks a bit like a high tea style thing to me. That said, though I wouldn't call the word a dead word or a shigo or anything like that, it is a word that is seeing less and less use. It's not like a word that's popping off at the moment. And indeed, you can see contemporary uses that are clearly choosing it to mean fashionable in a kind of not fashionable anymore, old-fashioned way. This person, for instance, uses it to describe a advertisement, which is, again, quite old. And this person here uses it with a number of slang terms that are pretty dead, such as yangu, to refer to a bike that is, again, like a kind of an old school bike. Certainly that old style. What's interesting, though, is back when this term was invented, it didn't have these kind of positive meanings. Indeed, haikara was first developed in 1898 as a critique of people that were obsessed with Western trends. The first noted use of this was by the journalist, suffragist, and political critic Ishikawa Yasujiro, who used it to mock people that he felt were too obsessed with following Western trends. The specific articles that he wrote using this term for the Yokohama Mainichi newspaper, not related to the current Mainichi newspaper, or actually this person says it's the Osaka Mainichi newspaper, but I'm going to trust the other source more, are not ones I can find. There might be pictures somewhere, but I don't have access to them. But in this, he critiqued politicians for wearing high-collared shirts, being more concerned with flouting their awareness and understanding of the West than, doing their jobs. In this critical use, the term also developed just kind of a broad meaning of like fad chaser, in critiquing people that followed any trends, maybe not just Western ones. This meaning is mostly lost to time. If you look at English dictionaries, including Jisho or Takoboto, that doesn't have this listing anymore. But that's, to be fair, it is a pretty dead meaning. No one in 2025 uses haikara in this critical way. But you can dig deep into Japanese dictionaries and find reference to it, such as this one in the Digital Daijiten via Weblio, which clearly notes things like seiyoufu, or Western style okidoru, or to put on airs, be pretentious about, and ryuko ottari, so following trends. Unfortunately for Ishikawa, it's a lot easier to critique trends than to stop people from jumping on those trends, as the people who were being critiqued for being haikara became more and more seen as fashionable, people decided to take the term as a compliment, resulting in the use we have today. Indeed, somewhat ironically, the only picture I could find of Ishikawa online has him in, it's not a short collar, certainly. And because Japanese people have always loved to play with words, I'd say people around the world have always loved to play with words, there was even a kanji representation developed in this whole process using ash and shell. Again, is basically dead, but I was able to find someone using it online. In a positive use, but it still exists. Someone out there remembers that this representation is possible. And while again, I would call haikara a fairly dead word overall, certainly dying, it has had a few revivals. You can find continued use on Google Trends, so people are at least interested in looking it up. And some advertising companies have made use of it. One particular trend that's worth noting is that around 2013, Suntory started using it as a combination of highball and karaage, referring to haikara as kind of making a pun on how eating these together would be very, very classy. I believe this was one of the first advertisements that was done in this style.
Haikara? ハイボールに唐揚げで。
ハイカラ。
短くすりゃいいってもんじゃないの。
いいな、ハイカラ。
People were talking about these ads by at least 2013. I can find people using haikara naturally, and not to discuss the ads, but just on their own to refer to a highball and karaage by 2017. I'm not saying you can go to your friends and say, let's go have some haikara and be understood, but at least some people are still using this. Indeed, Suntory has used this in advertisements just dating back to 2 years ago. And here's an example of a guy on YouTube in 2020 video recommending which highballs go the best with karaage.
今日はですね、タイトルにもあるとですね、唐揚げにも合う、ハイボール選手権ということですね。ハイカラハイどっちハイカラか。ハイカラって言うじゃないですか。なんかね、CM とかでもやってるよ。
The phrase has also created the variant bankara, which is the opposite, to say that someone is disheveled, slovenly, or behaving in a not very classy manner. I actually stumbled across this while preparing for this video. I'd never heard the word before in a post by the translator David Evelyn that you can see here, but actually this is not a new term either, even though it does have an entry in the Pixiv dictionary, because apparently it dates back to at least 1912, appearing in a Natsume Soseki novel of all things. Interestingly though, there is an old term that did survive that was used to critique people that are obsessed with the West or things that are too Western, and that is bata, which is a old spelling of butter, which normally has the long bar now, and kusai, or smells of butter, which does appear in some dictionaries, although it is a pretty dead word, as a critique of something for being too Western or having Western vibes. This one does not have positive uses. That said, you need to be careful with this one because the number one use of this phrase, but as bata with the longer ah, in 2025 is just to say that something smells of butter. Like, yeah, these noodles are Western noodles, but the person is complaining specifically about dairy. Likewise, here's another person that just has a problem with a smell of butter. There are, though, and indeed this is noted in the Pixiv description, some people who do still use this term to critique things for having kind of a Western style. Sometimes this can be in a xenophobic way, but oftentimes it's in a way that, I guess, walks a bit more of a tightrope, such as this person here who's saying that they were initially not interested in a video game product because the designs were kind of Western, or this person's here who similarly uses it in a way that doesn't, at least to me, seem discriminatory, although it definitely does show a critique for things that they appear to be Western. All in all, though, these uses are not very common, and this word is not very well known, so if you do hear someone refer to something as smelling of butter, I would assume that actually, yes, it literally smells like butter. So, now that we're back in 2025, I would say that none of these words are haikara at all, but I hoped you enjoyed, but in my opinion, it will always be fashionable to trace the history of how words have changed, even if doing so in English is a bit, buttery in how it smells.